The high limestone cliffs of the two-acre escarpment cut diagonally across the land of Arabia, running for nearly 1,000 miles from Riyadh in the center of the kingdom towards the south of the peninsula. Beyond their southern slope lies the great sandy desert of Arub al-Khali, or Empty Quarter. At a point where the sands spill through a broad gap in the escarpment was once a rich and prosperous city, now in ruins, known simply as Qaryat al-Faw, or the City of the Gap. Who lived here? What sustained them in this arid and barren place, 100 miles from the nearest modern settlement? The area is completely abandoned now, the silence broken only by the occasional camel herd which stops for water at the one well at Al-Faw. Is this perhaps a clue? The great trade routes which grew up all over Arabia are the key to understanding the history and settlement of the Arabian Peninsula. They linked the ancient and wealthy kingdoms of southwest Arabia to the lands which bordered the Mediterranean and the Arabian Gulf. Trading towns along these routes provided stopping places for the richly laden caravans. Al-Faw was one of these towns. Following the line of the route which passed through Al-Faw is a modern road. It provides an easier access for the successors to those ancient caravan trains. Once every year, the desert around Al-Faw is filled by those professional nomads of the 20th century, the archaeologists. Since 1972, a team from King Saud University, Riyadh, has carried out a systematic excavation of the site. Their leader is Professor Abdul Rahman Al-Ansari. Was Qaryat al-Faw a city of power, pomp and ceremony, or merely a simple resting place for travelers? The answers could be provided only by excavation and detailed scientific investigation. Although the work is far from completed, the results obtained so far have presented an intriguing picture of life during pre-Islamic times in this remote place. The first job of every season was to clear away the wind-blown sand, which each year threatened to undo the work of the archaeologists. If left undisturbed, it could rebury the city in a few decades. In the early years, excavations had centered on the largest mound on the site. At first, it could have been a palace or a fort. As it was uncovered, it became clear that it concealed something very different: the souk, or marketplace of the city. It had massive outer walls, nearly 6 meters thick, built of stone and sun-baked mud brick. Inside this were found the remains of many rooms and buildings, apparently constructed later, as they are not keyed in to the main wall. These rooms contained cavities or store cupboards, hollowed out of the walls and lined with gypsum plaster. Overlooking a central square is the facade of a more substantial building. Perhaps it was a wealthy merchant's house or customs office. The center of the souk is dominated by the large well. It is now dry, and excavation has revealed a 7-meter depth of stone lining, and also large stones which had been pushed into it at some time in the past. Outside the walled area of the souk were less substantial market stalls, perhaps for poorer traders and their customers. We can imagine that merchants, townsmen and travellers once thronged these narrow streets. The scene would have resembled those souks which still survive today in some areas of Arabia. These occupants of ancient Al-Faw discarded or lost the objects of everyday life, which, rediscovered by the archaeologists, have enabled them to put a date and a living image to the empty rooms and corridors. Over the last 10 years, these items have been recorded, studied, restored, and then put on display in a museum at the College of Arts building in King Saud University. Pottery of many shapes and sizes. Some is glazed and decorated with reliefs. Custom seals from other cities on the trade routes. Roman or Nabatean pots were found. One jar contained a quantity of date stones. Other vessels are carved from alabaster or from steatite. Incense burners were carved with decorations still seen in the region's architecture. Fine glass, simple jewelry. Many fine pieces of bronze were found in the souk, made by the lost wax process, possibly at Al-Faw. Coins from many parts of the ancient world. This one carries the monogram of Kachel, the god whose name recurs at Al-Faw and appears to have been synonymous with wisdom, mercy and generosity. Several religious or ritual objects were also identified, small clay figures covered with inscriptions. Little that is precious was discovered during the early years of the excavation. One piece of silver only, delicately engraved with an inscription. There are many other inscriptions on display in the museum. Most of these are in the Sabaean or South Arabian script, suggesting strong links between Al-Faw and the spice kingdoms of the southwest. These wooden combs were preserved in the dry sand. The wooden base of a small set of weighing scales. Carbon-14 analysis of organic remains like these has enabled the main occupation of the city to be dated between the 4th century BC and the 5th century AD. That means that pieces of cloth, some still showing the original patterns or design, either woven, printed or embroidered, have lain in the sand for up to 2,000 years. A few of these resemble clothing shown in classical frescoes. Others appear more like those found in modern Southwest Arabian designs, again suggesting a South Arabian connection. So the early work at Al-Faw Souk established a date, and also the major influences on the civilization that once flourished there. But what of the other areas of the substantial town? Where did the people live and work? For it was apparent that the souk was separated from the town. The archaeologists accordingly turned their attention to a large mound 500 meters from the souk. The first task was to set out the grid pattern for this new excavation. While the preparation for this investigation proceeded, a group of staff and students climbed the escarpment above Al-Faw in search of prehistoric remains. They soon found themselves engrossed in what is as yet a totally mysterious phenomenon. The whole escarpment top is covered with curiously proportioned man-made structures. They may be very ancient, or date from the Neolithic period, which ended about 4,000 years ago, or they may be as recent as the city of Al-Faw itself. As there is no topsoil, and therefore no layer deposits for dating, nor any other remains associated with them, they must remain for now a mystery. For the archaeology students of King Saud University, Al-Faw provides a training workshop on a grand scale. Practical work like this reinforces the knowledge that attention to detail and extreme accuracy are the only ways to achieve anything worthwhile. But they had not left the lecture theatre behind. The grid system provides an accurate way of recording finds. The walls, or balks, temporarily left in place, retain a record of the strata already dug through, and can also be used as a wheelbarrow route without damaging the excavation.
يوسف ايش رايك الطبقة دي داخل في هذه؟
لا في فصل من هنا جاي. في داخل الطبقة بالنسبة لي.
Each new layer was recorded and marked as it was discovered.
جاي كذا شوفها من هنا.
The position of every find had to be plotted before it was moved, and the information recorded. At every stage, the work was photographed. Gradually, the shapes of the buildings emerged, but their uses were not at first obvious. One area, for example, revealed a maze of walls. The walls were plastered with gypsum and were in very good condition. Inscriptions on some led the archaeologists to wonder whether these rooms were used for religious purposes. The chambers opened onto a courtyard in which was found the remains of organic waste and animal droppings. As the work on this section progressed, a cesspit was identified, with provision for cleaning out the waste for use on the nearby fields. Another site in the residential area, in a prime position nearest to the souk, was identified as the house of a wealthy merchant family. The house had its own water storage tank. A majlis, or council room, was revealed. Stone blocks were set out in much the same way as cushions are arranged in a modern Arabian reception room. The floor shows the marks of ancient fires and suggests the hospitality offered to the traveling merchants passing through Al-Faw. Most of the houses had provision for grinding grain. There's evidence that large areas around Al-Faw were cultivated. Remains of water storage jars were found. Larger rooms had central pillars, suggesting a shortage of long timbers for roof construction. In places, whole sections of roof, still supported by timber and palm matting, were found intact. Inscriptions provided important information. Everyone was traced and photographed so that it could be deciphered later. Inscriptions invoking Kachel, the god of wisdom, are found widely at Al-Faw. This one is carved into the rock face on the two-wake escarpment. This one also celebrates Kachel. Sometimes he is referred to by alternative titles, such as the god of the heavens. So far, all the inscriptions had been in the Sabaean alphabet. But one day, a very important script began to emerge under brush and trowel. It was Nabatean, the script of a people living 1,500 miles away to the north around Petra. Here was evidence of foreign travelers at Al-Faw. The courtyard area was now identified as a traveler's resting place, or caravanserai, and the many inscriptions seemed to be a collection of travelers' graffiti. Another mystery. What were the small cavities at the base of some walls? Closer examination showed that wooden bars had been set in them. Could they have been anchoring points for looms, of a type still used in some areas of the world? It became clear that the site had grown steadily, and later additions had been made. At the foot of these steps, the floor was removed to reveal a lower and earlier floor.
Move up.
The ground plan was becoming clear, but what did the buildings look like? A rough drawing on a street corner provided the answer. Built essentially of the same materials, it wasn't surprising that they resembled houses still inhabited in this part of Arabia. Modern travelers visiting Qariat al-Faw are no longer pursuing commerce and trade, but knowledge. Instead of seeking food and shelter, they bring their own supplies with them. The archaeological work at Al-Faw has an important place among the activities of King Saud University. It is keenly supported by such people as the president of the university, Dr. Mansour Al-Turki, who visited the site together with academic staff from a number of faculties. It is clear that the university is performing two roles in this remote region of Arabia. As a result of the efforts of the archaeology department, a major town is being uncovered. It has already provided proof that there was an ancient and important civilization in the area with a highly developed culture and commerce. The university is also providing its archaeological students with valuable experience on a major site.
والدكاكين تلاقي درج وتلاقي المخازن وتلاقي الدور العلوي بعضه المخازن وبعضه للسكن والراحة. فاحنا نشوف هذه المجموعة اللي من هنا وايش فيه.
أقول لك الثالث الميلادي هي عبد الرحمن؟
اي.
ها؟
يقول اليوم انت اليوم يعني اكيد كان
بالنسبه للسور المربع ده كان حصل الاخ علي مع الدكتور غانم في غيابنا يمكن يعطي فكره حضرتك يعني.
The visit over, the students started a new project to discover how the citizens of ancient Al-Faw got the raw materials for their earthenware pottery. A site on the face of the escarpment showed signs of having been worked before. The clay brought from the mountain has a deep red color because it is rich in iron. The team's conservator put the clay to the test. Trial pots were made, then fired. The results resembled ancient pottery found on the site. Plaster of Paris was used to reconstruct some of this original pottery in the laboratory tent. Many other items had to be repaired and conserved before they could be taken back to the university. The hot, dry sand had preserved this piece of palm leaf matting, but now the scientist had to take over. Corrosive salt had to be soaked out of pottery. Every item had to be cleaned. Then each object was catalogued for the records. Everything was photographed as well. An intriguing feature of the site is the number of what appear to be tree planting circles around the city. There are thousands. Judging by the number of date stones, Al-Faw was once green with groves of date palms. How were these trees irrigated and the city supplied with water? There is evidence of a complex water gathering system with a long canal running from the escarpment to a reservoir near the city. Many other areas show evidence of copious supplies of water being available. The work of surveying these and many other features was a continuous process throughout the excavation period. The many underground tombs and related inscriptions added much to the investigators' knowledge. Most of the tombs had a similar construction. An entrance shaft with smooth plastered walls leading down to a series of chambers mined in the hard limestone. One tomb was clearly identified as that of a king. His gravestone refers to him as Muwaya bin Rabia, king of Khatan and Murtij. This links the city of Al-Faw to the famous inscription dating from the 4th century AD, found at Namara near Damascus, and implies that Al-Faw may have been the last flowering of that civilization and culture known as Kinde, before its final collapse in the 5th century AD. Standing around the site of the city are ancient weather-worn towers constructed of mud brick. At the foot of one of them was found the Camel's Foot tomb, so called because of the layout of its chambers. Although robbers in the ancient past had beaten the archaeologists to all these tombs, they had still overlooked some things of value, such as these delicate gold necklaces and fine jewelry. A temple site was identified, mainly by an inscription. The name of the person to whom it is dedicated is illegible, but he asks, in recognition of the fact that he has built this temple, that his God should bless and pardon him and his offspring. Heavy cast bronze wall plaques were also found on this site, again in the Sabaean script. These fine bronze figures were also found there. They show obvious links with the classical world. A winged statue. A gracefully formed dolphin found at least 400 kilometers from the sea. A figure representing a hermaphrodite, a drummer, an acrobat, and an unmistakable likeness of Hercules, whose statues are found in all the cities of the ancient world, influenced by Hellenistic culture following the conquests of Alexander the Great. The site of a large palace provided the final evidence that ancient Al-Faw had close links with the classical world and its culture. Some rough lumps of limestone fallen to its floor were seen to contain painted surfaces. They were taken to the laboratory tent for investigation. The walls had been richly painted. The end of each season is only a temporary pause in the continuing work at Al-Faw. Even the current season's work is not completed as the convoy leaves for Riyadh. There are still months of work needed to complete the cleaning and mounting of the frescoes. Sketched plans must be transformed into fine drawings. Thousands of photos must be developed and classified. Many theories about the site must be discussed. What has been learnt must be shared with the students.
الحفرية التي أجريناها في هذا العام.
Archaeology in Saudi Arabia is still in its infancy. So too is the work at Qariat al-Faw. The mysterious city on the edge of the empty quarter has already given up some of its secrets. Future seasons' work will reveal to us what more these sands conceal.